So the next question is from Stephen, aged 3, and he'd like to know what are the most challenging bits of the galas? What are the bits that you found most challenging? And we'll go to Chris.
You say Chris then? You broke up.
Yeah.
I'm from Stephen, age 3.
Stephen age 3.
He's very eloquent.
I think probably some of the most challenging bits, but enjoyable nonetheless, is what feels like a mad week's worth of setting up, from locos arriving to making sure we've got people on site to lend a hand, and we can all recall those times where fish and chips have gone cold because we've been removing bits of track and things like that. But I think it's definitely trying to do what the start of a week feels like an insurmountable amount of work. But actually, when you get to the end of Friday, before we start playing on Saturday, it's that initial bit of setup for me. I think it's probably the most challenging bit, and getting people on board sometimes as well, because it's not just the enjoyment. We actually need to be able to run trains, otherwise it's pointless.
Yeah, I've just realised the workshop floor is not going to get cleaned this year, is it?
Well, you're saying that, but I bet Ian will do it anyway.
What about you, Paul?
I think, I've got to go with similar to what Chris has said. I think the week prior to the gala, that Monday to Friday, when visiting engines start arriving, visiting crews start arriving, our own staff and volunteers start arriving for various lengths of time, coming in and giving as much of their time as they can. Just getting everybody on board, as Chris said, and getting everything in the right place at the right time and getting all the jobs done by Friday tea time, so we get some chance to go home on Friday tea time. It's got to be the biggest challenge of the week, just getting everything done. I think the actual gala on the Saturday and Sunday is the fun part, really. That's not the challenging part, despite how it may look. If things
to quote my darling fiance, is that the week of the gala, Chris? Yes, it is. Well, I won't be seeing you then, will I? Is effectively how it's known in this house. But it's one of the challenges. It's not just a case of things arriving, is it? And that's it. It goes. Like Stuart mentioned earlier on, things have got to be tested. We've got to make sure things are fit to run. We've got to tick the boxes, because whilst it may very well seem as if it's plain trains, actually, people should also remember that there's the safety element, which always has to be at the very forefront of your mind.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you reckon, Stu?
There's a lot of challenges actually, and it depends what role you're doing. The week up to the gala, the first couple of days are usually quite nice actually, because there's not too many people about, and you can get on. And then as engines start to appear, people forget that they need to do all the other bits that go on, because there's an engine there, and we might get a chance to have a play and all that sort of stuff. And I think we did change because we did tighten up what we did in the week up to the gala, partly because we were all scared of Anne Levick. And if the barbecue tent wasn't set up, by the time they arrived on Friday, we knew about it.
Yeah.
And also that where it was so easy, where because we weren't that experienced at doing it at that point, people were like continually on the Friday night wanting to play, and it's like, well, it's 7 o'clock now, chaps, we've got to go home and rest. But it is that where there's a lot of jeopardy in that week as well, because we've had engines nearly not come that week.
Yeah.
And there's, for political reasons and logistical reasons, we've had engines go missing, like and things like that. And then the weekend, depending on what role you're doing, can be a challenge. Because if you're shunter at Clayton West, and you're not particularly motivated, it can be quite hard for the controller to get everything when they're playing chess to make sure everything's in the right order. And you're conscious that there's other things moving around. It can be quite hard work. I always really enjoyed Sunday evening when everything went back in the shed, because you knew you'd made it and you were there and you didn't have to worry. And of course, in the week up to it, Steve will vouch for this. There is the pre-gala nightmare that everyone has, where you suddenly have dreams of everything going spectacularly wrong, but they're just a little too vivid, which may mean you need to get out a bit more, maybe.
I don't know. Steam locos are not designed to fly. That's the part that makes me the most nervous.
That is one of the things, isn't it? When you see them up in the air and you think,
yeah, no.
I used to really enjoy offloading them, but you just want them on ground.
Yeah.
In a controlled way. And actually, I think the worst one we ever picked up was Doris or Lady Wakefield. That didn't like being picked up, and that really that didn't enjoy it at all, did it?
And that lorry drive, and that was the other thing, is it was finding a haulage contractor that you could trust. And that night when it arrived, although it was an absolute pig, the bloke who was driving the high-ab was brilliant, and he was so careful and considered with what he was doing, and was in quite a contrast to some others that had been, where you'd sort of think, well, they're never moving our engines, and that was for that company that we used for quite a long period. You always really trusted the drivers. And it was always quite the other bit that was always frightening was when, particularly in the years when, like the Cleethorpes Coast Gala used to take place every 2 weeks throughout the year, and we'd send our engine back to Cleethorpes, and you'd see a lorry leaving with sort of like £1.5 million worth of kit on the back, thinking, gosh, this could go very interesting on the motorway. Fortunately, it never did.
No. And I think that was the challenge, I reckon, the haulage has always been, logistically, it's just a nightmare, isn't it? Actually working out how to get them things. And sometimes we've had lifting cradles that we've had to factor in. And they're not light, are they? I mean, when we're picking up like Black Prince, we were best part of 10 ton, wasn't it? And that whole thing of arranging that, getting them collected at the right time when the railways can actually facilitate the wagon turning up and picking it up, and it landing with us at the right time. And that's always once they're there, you're kind of in control of it, aren't you? But until everything's landed, it's like, whoa.
Exactly. One of the challenges that I've just thought of, it always used to happen on a Friday, and that was to try and prevent the appearance of a certain member of staff. And that was to try and prevent the appearance of Gala Stew. It didn't very well succeed, but it was a challenge in itself.
Some people might even say it was a challenge to get him out.
I did mellow in later years.
You did, I'll give you that. Yeah,
particularly calm last year, Stu.
Pardon?
Particularly calm last year, I thought.
I was particularly calm last year because I didn't arrive till Saturday tea time. I went straight to the beer tent.
So I've got one more question, and then we've got two more from the public. So the last one is, what factors do you think are important to make a good gala?
I think you need the theme.
Yeah.
And it was always, and I think that's kind of why it worked, because we were quite strict in that there was a point to why you'd invited that engine. And it stopped it getting out of hand, because if you've got too many engines, there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of quite an important part of it. But it all gels it together so that it captures people's imagination.
Yeah, I think the other theme for me is what's really important is the gala is the only event that we do that's really aimed at enthusiasts. but still, probably the majority of our clientele are families, and I think it gives it that kind of broader appeal than just being about a steam engine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stuart and I mentioned this earlier on, and it's whilst there's the safety side of running a railway, etc., it's not too serious either. We're quite laid back in terms of what we do. So
some people are.
Well, it's like having a theme and just putting a bit of effort into just making those small touches here and there. Trying to make sure something in the cafes, like some of the food they might do, might be more appropriate to the theme of the gala than what we would normally do. Things like that, and it's that which grabs people into the theme, isn't it? Aside
Katie's Rock.
Katie's Rock, yes.
Yeah. By far the most worthwhile investment for allowing children of small ages to behave completely uncontrollably and spit green phlegm at each other.
It's all gone, hasn't it?
But you are right in that there aren't many railways that would run a four-poster bed on a well wagon for a dining car with another truck with a table set up for candlelight dining and a bar car.
Yeah.
And the giant scone.
Yeah.
Or the boat on the beach.
The boat on the beach. The Barmouth ferry people will be very happy about our nod to their ferry. But I think one of the things that strikes me is you've got to have something happening all the time, haven't you? I think you've got to keep people's attention, and it's really important that it doesn't go quiet for too long. So I think we end up during a day, a normal gala day, where a lot of the engines migrate themselves to Shelley, because there's probably more to do at Clayton West than there is at Shelley, and it adds to that interest. There's more departures, isn't there, in terms of the shuttles and stuff, and just having something there moving around that people can see. And I think that's probably why the Battle of the Atlantics was so good, because there was always something happening everywhere, really. And I think that's quite important.
I mean, there are rules there as well that we don't realise we've got in place, that's like these galas that, like, on a standard gauge railway that may have double track, and in the middle of the afternoon we start running passenger trains just to run goods trains for our own amusement. And that like, we had that rule that you do not have a goods train that takes a train path when you've got passengers waiting. And it is all focused for the visitor rather than sort of being indulgent and just doing stuff for our own benefit, because it was all about spectacle.
Well, we do have rules, though, I think, in that it doesn't matter how big the engine is, we always let it have a run up to Shelley at some point over the weekend. And I think that's important for the people that come with them. But we've got to kind of make some room for that service, haven't we? But we always
And you need diversity as well in what people can see. If people see the same thing each year, then it loses its appeal. So you need diversity, not just the locos you get, but in, like you say, the theme, and the whole experience needs to change each year.
What are your challenges, Steve, other than the nightmare?
My challenges? We're going back to challenges.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that takes up a bit of time is working out which locos you're going to put on which trains. And I tend to go somewhere quiet and do that with lots of highlighters. And we have to do 3 or 4 different versions, because you never quite know what they're going to be capable of until they come. You have a general feeling, don't you? Some of the bigger engines, you kind of know they ought to do it because they're doing it day in, day out where they come from. But especially some of the small ones, you just don't know until you get them there and try them what they'll do. So there's quite a bit of work that gets put into paper that just gets thrown in the bin on a Friday morning, isn't there? But it's about making sure that it works, isn't it, on the day? And
So when you're there with your highlighters in your quiet place, what does the person on the train sat next to you think you're doing when you're drawing all the
I think they just think I'm crazy, really. It's a good year to do it this year, wouldn't it? Because nobody had been sat next to me. I could have just done it.
You could have spread out.